So Jose Mourinho, the new Tottenham manager, and alarm bells are ringing everywhere it seems. The general consensus is this is going to end in tears. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. What I would say is that it's not an absolute foregone conclusion that Mourinho is going to fail at Tottenham. And I guess we need to define what failure is, because making the top four isn't a difficult target for Spurs, you wouldn't imagine, this season. As bad as things were going, the underlying numbers have not been good to the start of the season, so it's not a surprise that Mauricio Pochettino is gone. But this is still a team that should be making the top four. There's plenty of time left in the season to do that. Mourinho knows exactly how to get a team into the top four, as he proved at Manchester United, and I fully expect Tottenham to make the top four. But in terms of why he's been appointed and why Mourinho, I think basically Tottenham and Daniel Levy have reached a point where they've followed the process for so long and they wanted outcomes. They wanted to start to see results on all the promise that they've shown in recent years. They've been cast as the nearly men in a couple of title races, getting to a Champions League final, things like that. But Pochettino was never the manager to get it over the line. I don't think he's a big innovator tactically in big matches. I don't think he's a manager that's going to give you an edge. He's just, he was very good at putting a process in place and making, just drilling players basically in what, the principles that he formed for going way back to his time under Marcelo Bielsa in the 90s. He's unusual in the sense that he was an early adopter of the pressing game and one of the first people to bring it to the English game, and I think that gave him an edge at Southampton and then at Spurs. Now that the pressing game is commonplace and everyone knows the nuances of how Tottenham play, I think the Tottenham players were possibly looking to Pochettino for something extra and weren't getting it. I don't think that he was capable of taking them to another level than kind of reinforcing the same old identity over and over again and trying to double down on playing the same way and getting better and better and better at it. I think he's taken that game to its limit. I think opponents are more, savvy and clued up now of how to prepare and play against Tottenham. And basically just an apathy to set in this season. You look at the underlying numbers, it's not fully evident in the results, but you look at the underlying numbers, and I kind of liken it back to Jurgen Klopp's last season at Borussia Dortmund. It just feels like something's changed, something's gone there after that Champions League final last season and the disappointment of losing that final. That they've returned this season and they're not the same team. So I'm not surprised that Pochettino's gone, and now as a club, and Daniel Levy as a chairman, is basically they want outcomes now. They want trophies. They want results. They want something back on these years of trust in a process. And there's no bigger outcome manager than Jose Mourinho. He's all about results and nothing else. Often in more recent times to the detriment of the process and the people who try to get in the way of his outcomes. Possibly the best analogy I can think of is, I think he's a spent force, and I think Mourinho knows in his own mind he's a spent force in so much that he'll never be the number one guy again. He was the number one manager in the world for a good 5 or 6 years at Chelsea, at Inter Milan. And I don't think that was disputed by too many people. He was the best manager in the world, and he's never going to get back to that. The game's moved on. I think he's aware that the game's moved on beyond his concepts and what worked for him, his methods. And I think he knows that. I think he understands that. But like a poker player, that was once a great poker player and had all the resources to be a great poker player, he keeps going back for trying to get on the big table one last time, and this is how it feels very much his career in recent years, because he knows you catch a few breaks early. He knows how to manage, how to create success, and how to make things happen. But nowadays he needs to catch the right breaks every step of the way, and I think he's so outcome focused that if he doesn't get the outcomes he wants with the team that he's managing, then he starts to look for his own outcomes, and those outcomes are, big compensation packages and getting out of contracts early because he knows it's not going the way, that he wanted it to go initially. He starts feuding with players. He causes all sorts of problems behind the scene, and he basically is almost just quite transparent in wanting to bring things to a head swiftly, take his money and move on. So I think that's kind of where we're at with Jose Mourinho. I think he's going to be very focused to begin with. I think he's going, he's inheriting a team that's capable of doing something, this season. You wouldn't rule out another epic Champions League run for Tottenham this season with the same players and now Mourinho in charge, and possibly going one step further. So in that respect, it's a bit of a shot to nothing initially, because he might walk into the club and be a breath of fresh air to begin with, and the players like him, and the stories that have circulated around him in recent years might seem like not there on the surface, and the players could warm to him initially, but when things aren't necessarily going his way and he's not necessarily getting the outcomes he wants, then he'll start to become a destructive presence. So for Tottenham, this does feel like a gamble. He is a manager that's capable of bringing some of those outcomes that they're after, maybe landing some trophies, and at least having something to show for this era and this team that's developed over recent years. But ultimately, he's not good for the long-term future of the club, unless he has unparalleled success, or unless he reverts back to his earlier days and sort of builds on some early breaks and wins, multiple trophies and possibly even mounts a title challenge. I don't necessarily expect that, but I think Manchester City and Liverpool are too far ahead at the moment for those two to be caught. But I think Tottenham should firmly establish themselves back in the top four and become that force again in that respect. And knockout competitions, is every possibility that they might land something in a knockout competition. But I think they need to find some sort of success quite early, because if they don't, then I think we're going to see the same pattern repeated over and over that we saw with Mourinho in his second stint at Chelsea, at Manchester United. I think he's just going to become more of a destructive force, looking for his own outcomes rather than the outcomes that benefit everybody at stake.